But thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if I'm the one that sent the person to the thing, it seems like probation has to make sure that they're able to accomplish what I'm asking them to accomplish. If they don't speak English and I send them to a place, I mean, that doesn't make sense, but I'll find out.
Okay.
This is case number 0451670, the people of the state of Michigan versus Kelvin Smith. The defendant is charged with 1 count of assault aggravated. Today is the date set for trial. Appearances, please.
For the record, Your Honor, Christina Bruno on behalf of the people.
And for the record, Your Honor, Janice Stevenson appearing on behalf of Mr. Kelvin Smith. Mr. Smith, sir, please tell the judge your full name.
My name is Kelvin Wendell Smith.
Thank you. Today is the day set for trial. Are the people ready to proceed?
Judge, today is the day set for trial. People are ready to proceed.
Is the defense ready to proceed?
Defense is ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Are there any preliminary matters before we begin?
Just a few, Judge, there are 2 exhibits that the people would like to live into evidence in the defense counsel that's stipulated to both.
Okay, what are they?
Exhibit number 1 is a picture of the injury on the defendant, and exhibit number 2 are the medical discharge for the hospital.
Ms. Dixon, you stipulate to the admission of people to exhibits 1 and 2?
Just one sec. Definitely have no problem with the picture.
Which exhibit was the picture?
Exhibit number 1, Your Honor.
And I don't have any objection to the discharge instructions.
People's exhibits 1 and 2 are admitted with no objection from the defense. Anything further?
Yes, Your Honor, and at this time, the people motion for order sequestration. So, Judge, I anticipate 2. My complaint witness is here. The other witness was the officer witness as well.
Motion for sequestration is granted. It's mutual. Do you have a OIC?
I do not.
All right. Does the defense anticipate any witnesses outside of whether or not the client is testifying?
Your Honor, in addition to the possibility of my client testifying, I do have 3 individuals, Your Honor, who are referenced in the complaining witness's statement that he made. Those individuals are Julian Smith, Kelvin Smith II, and Jordan Smith. That's possible.
And Judge, actually, if I can raise an objection for the record, there was a reference to 4 individuals in the statement from the complaining witness. It doesn't name those 4 individuals. So I'm objecting to those witnesses being called without notice of the people.
Those individuals are referenced, Your Honor. The actual statements is Kelvin Smith and his 4 sons.
All right, I'll move to the
Thank you, Your Honor.
The motion for sequestration is granted. It's mutual. The proceedings are being live streamed. The witnesses are prohibited from watching any of the live stream. Anything further before we begin?
Not from the people.
All right.
Your Honor, I just want to have an opportunity to confer with the possible witnesses to make sure that they're not watching.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir, you may proceed.
That was Mr. She said she took care of her temperature report.
Yes, yes, thank you. I was up here when we came.
Okay. That's right.
If I go over, for lunch, that's they want you to see. So if I go over, then I'm gonna let you go. While I'm finishing this, I need some time for all the questions.
No, okay. I mean, I can stay.
Mm-mm.
I have my water. I'm good. I'm good.
I'm happy in your arm.
You got a kind bar too, Judge.
You got what?
You got a kind bar.
Oh, yeah, right. I got energy.
Oh, I can bring this stuff I have in my car. All right, are we ready to proceed?
I was looking for a cup.
Well, they'll get you one. You can bring your own like this.
Okay.
Any opening statement on behalf of the people?
Yes, Judge, very briefly, Your Honor. So the people bring forth the case.
You need to go get your cup. Is that what you're saying?
Unless Mr. Kraft.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Kraft.
All right, Ms. Britton, thank you, Judge.
Judge, the people bring forth this case, from this court as an incident that happened on March 11th of 2020. At that time, Your Honor, the complainant witness, Mr. Gardner, was at his father's house, in a residence at the city of Detroit, when he came into contact with the defendant, who came to his father's house, Kelvin Smith. Judge, the court will hear testimony from the complainant witness, Mr. Edward Gardner, as to his verbal altercation with the defendant. After that, the court will hear testimony from Mr. Gardner that the defendant drew back his closed fist and hit Mr. Gardner right above the eye, causing a laceration and an eye injury to the complainant witness. After this altercation, Your Honor, the complainant witness went down to the 8th precinct and came into contact with Officer Reed. And the people anticipate that the court will hear testimony from Officer Reed, that he took this report from Mr. Gardner, the complainant witness, who told him what happened regarding that incident and observed these injuries. Your Honor, after the court sees the exhibits that the people would admit to evidence that was stipulated by the defense counsel, and after hearing the testimony from the complainant witness, Mr. Gardner, and the officer who took the report, Officer Reed, the people are asking the court to come back with a guilty verdict to count one assault, aggravated assault.
Okay, any opening at this time on behalf of the defense?
Very briefly, Your Honor, so we believe the evidence is gonna show that unfortunately, my client and some of his family members were gathered together at the location of the incident to prepare for the funeral of my client's mother-in-law. She had just passed away. Family members are gathering at the house, Your Honor. Just trying to get ready for that. And that the complaining witness, by his own admission, Your Honor, he's at the house and my client is there. And for some reason, the complaining witness approaches and kind of inquires of my client, what are you doing here? And we believe the evidence is going to show that everything that at some point, the complaining witness is asked by his own father and other family members to leave the house because of his behavior, that the whole incident starts with the complaining witness's aggressive behavior toward my client. Unexpected, unanticipated aggressive behavior toward my client. We believe the evidence is going to show that the complaining witness's aggression continues, that the physical altercation that does take place between these parties starts by the complaining witness pushing my client. We believe the evidence is going to show there was some type of a fight between these parties, but it started by the complaining witness's aggressive behavior and assaultive behavior against my client. We're going to ask it and the proofs to find Kelvin Smith not guilty.
All right, please may call their first witness.
Thank you, Judge. At this time, the people would like to call Edward Gardner to the stand.
That's fine. Well, so that's the case.
No, yes.
Okay, your name, please. Understand? Step towards me, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Mr. Garner.
Mr. Gardner, I need you to keep your voice up. I need you to adjust the mic in front of you. It moves, the handle moves. All right, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Garner.
How you doing?
Mr. Garner, can you state your full name for the record, please?
Edward Gardner.
And Mr. Gardner, I want to take you back to March 11th of 2020. Do you recall that day?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall where you were home?
Who is that? What's her name? I couldn't hear her. Did you want to hear her name? Is that
Tanya Bates.
someone that could stay in the courtroom?
She's, Mr. Gardner's wife.
Okay, she wasn't there that day?
No, and
All right.
since they called.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Gardner, do you recall, what you were doing, or, I'm sorry, do you recall where you were on March 11th of 2020?
At my father's house.
Okay, and does your father reside in the city of Detroit?
Yes.
And is that the county of Wayne?
Yes.
Okay, and who was present at your father's house when you first arrived?
It was my three sisters. And kids.
Okay, was there anyone else present at your father's home?
No.
Okay, and about how long did you stay at your father's house on this day?
I had just got off work and went over there because we was planning for my mother's funeral. So I went to go check on my father. And he was upstairs in his bedroom with the door closed.
Okay, and what happened after you went to check on your father?
I stayed up there with him for about an hour.
Okay, and did anything happen next?
No.
Okay, so after this hour passed, did anyone else arrive to the home?
I didn't know because I was upstairs. I came when my father told me to go get the pot and water out the car. That's when I noticed that Calvin was there.
Okay, and the person that you're calling Calvin, do you see them in the courtroom?
Yes.
Can you point at that person and tell me what they're wearing?
Blue suit.
Can you tell me anything else about their appearance or what they're wearing?
Glasses. Light blue shirt. Shirt.
Judge, may the record reflect the identification of the defendant, Mr. Calvin Smith.
The record reflects the identification of counsel.
Thank you. And at this point, where are you when you observed Mr. Smith?
Coming down the steps from upstairs.
Okay, are you still in the home or are you outside?
And
So you're in the home at this point?
Yeah.
And where's Mr. Smith? Is he inside or outside?
he's sitting at the dining room table.
Okay, and what happens after you observe Mr. Smith?
I asked my sister, why is he in my father's house?
Okay, and the sister you're referring to, what's your sister's name?
Jerry Gardner.
Okay, and did Mr. Smith do or say, and this is a yes or no question, did Mr. Smith do or say anything at this point when you asked your sister that?
Yeah, she jumped in my face.
Okay, and where are you standing when Mr. Smith jumps in your face?
Right at the dining room entrance.
Okay, and is there anyone else present when Mr. Smith jumps in your face?
My three sisters.
Wasn't there anyone else?
No.
No, okay, and what happens next?
I leave and go outside and they in the house arguing, so my father comes downstairs.
Okay, let me slow you down a little bit. So when you say they're in the house arguing, who are you referring to?
My sisters in Cal.
So objective speculation, Your Honor. I think that the witness testified that he went outside and I don't know how he could know what was happening.
Cause I hear him.
No, that's not my court words. She certainly wasn't talking to Mr. Smith. I mean, Gardner. Ms. Ritter responds.
I refer the question to them.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Gardner, when you were outside, could you hear or see anything that was going on inside the home?
Yes,
Okay, could you hear or see anything?
yes.
What did you hear or see?
That they was telling me to get out and you don't gotta go nowhere. My father was like, you're not supposed to be in my house.
Okay, so that's what you heard going on inside the home?
Yes,
Okay, and if you know, do you know who your father was referring to as to who couldn't be in the home?
Calvin Smith.
Okay. And what happened after you heard this?
I went across the street and my daddy told them that they gotta leave his house.
So what's across the street?
No, I just got away from the scene.
Okay, and that's when your father told, Mr. Smith that he had to leave the home?
Yes,
Okay, did Mr. Smith leave at this point?
that's when he said, well, me and my boys finna leave. That's when they started grabbing all their clothes, putting them in the car.
Okay,
And then after they put the clothes and all their stuff in the car, that's when he proceeded to come across the street where I was standing,
who was he?
Calvin Smith.
Okay, and what did you do at this point when Mr. Smith approached you across the street?
I didn't do nothing, I just stood there,
Okay, and where are you standing across the street?
like right with it between the grass and the curb.
Okay, and what happens next when Mr. Smith comes in your direction across the street?
Got up in my face,
Okay, and where was Mr. Smith standing at this point when he was in your face?
directly in my face, like close,
Okay,
kissing close.
okay, and what happened next?
I tried to step away and that's when I feel he started beating me on this side,
Which side?
my left side.
Okay, and you're pointing to somewhere on your face. Can you describe what part of your face that?
My eyes, my head, I was getting close to the head
Okay, when you say blows, you recall if it was with a fist or an eye?
with his fist, with his rings on.
Okay, do you recall if it was Mr. Smith's right hand or left hand?
Right,
Okay, and was it a closed fist or open?
close fist.
Okay, and do you recall how many times you were hit in that area on your face?
I blacked out and I just know I got hit a whole bunch of times while I was on the ground.
Okay, now do you recall how long you blacked out for?
Couple seconds.
Okay, and what happened after you regained your consciousness?
When I got up off the ground, they was already in their car driving off.
Who is that?
The kids, Calvin, my sister, and Calvin and the kids. They had two cars.
Okay, when you say the kids, who kids are you referring to?
Calvin Smith, Julian Smith, and Kendall Smith.
Okay, and what did you do after that?
Drove home to my wife.
Okay, and did you go anywhere else after that?
Yeah, she took me to the hospital.
Okay, do you recall what hospital you went to?
Beaumont and Dearborn.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Judge, at this time, the people like to admit People's Exhibit 2 is the evidence that's already amended. Thank you, Judge. At this time, the people like to publish People's Exhibit 2 to the court. You may. Thank you, Madam Approach. You may. And did you go anywhere else after the hospital, Mr. Gardner?
They told me to go file a report at the police station,
Who's that?
the hospital.
Okay, and do you recall, how long after your hospital visit did you go file the police report?
Straight there
Okay, and do you remember which, precinct you went to?
on 6 Mile Grand, at 8%.
Okay, and what happened when you got to the precinct?
They took my report
Who was that?
to the officer.
Okay, do you recall, the name of this officer? Okay, okay, so the officer took your report, did you speak with anyone else after the officer took your report that day?
Yes, the lieutenant.
Okay, and did you make a statement with the lieutenant who contacted you that day?
Yes,
Okay, now, after you made your statement, Mr. Gardner, did you do anything else regarding, this incident, or did you give anything to the lieutenant regarding this incident?
no,
Okay. May I have one moment, Judge? Mr. Garner, just a few questions. I just want to go back. So when you went to the hospital, did you sustain any injuries from the incident?
yes,
Which injuries did you sustain?
a concussion,
Okay, did you sustain any physical injuries to your face?
my left eye, not fully functional no more.
Okay, were there any other injuries that you sustained? Because of this? Okay, now did you report those injuries to the police, I'm sorry, the lieutenant who took the report?
Yeah, she had my, from the hospital.
Say that again?
She had paperwork from the hospital that I took to.
Okay, Judge, at this time, if people would like to publish people's proposed exhibit, I'm sorry, people's exhibit one of the evidence. Now, and Mr. Gardner, do you recall, anything else after you made your report to the 8th precinct? Okay, Judge, I have no further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Good morning, Mr. Carter. Good afternoon, Mr. Carter. Okay, so Mr. Garner, did you have an opportunity to make a statement to the police about this incident?
Excuse me?
Did you have an opportunity to make a statement to the police about this incident?
Yeah,
Okay, all right. So, you testified that you're upstairs at the house and you came downstairs. That's the first time you came into contact with Mr. Smith on this date?
yes,
Okay, and did you say anything to Mr. Smith when you came downstairs?
I asked my sister, why is he here?
Do you remember telling the police that you asked Mr. Smith why he was there?
Yes, it's in the report.
Okay, so did you ask, who did you ask? Did you ask Mr. Smith or did you ask somebody else on Mr. Smith?
I asked my sister,
Okay, do you remember telling the police that you asked Mr. Smith why he was there?
no, I asked my sister why he was there.
Okay, so do you remember telling the police that you asked Mr. Smith why he was there?
Yes, I probably did.
Okay, so did you ask Mr. Smith what he's doing here?
Yeah, after I asked my sister, and he jumped in my face.
Okay, so,
I said, I told him my daddy don't want you here. You know that,
okay, your dad was there?
yes.
Okay, all right. So who else is in the house when you get downstairs?
My 3 sisters was in the dining room, and the kids was in the living room.
Okay, who are the kids?
Calvin Smith, Kendall Smith, and Julian Smith. My other nephew, Darius. I think that's it.
Okay, so you get downstairs and there are, so what is that, about 7 or 8 people down there?
Yes,
Okay, all right. Where's your dad?
he was upstairs.
Okay, all right. So, do you like Kelvin Smith at the date of this incident? Are you guys friends?
Judge,
or-
objection to relevance.
So I guess I would wonder how that would not be right. How these family
How
members
you
are.
can respond to an objection? Respond with an objection by telling me how it is relevant.
So, I think it goes to the nature of the interaction between these parties, that Mr. Garner has concluded, he's come to court telling the court that Mr. Smith has attacked him, and I just want to know how they're getting along at the time, right before this attack is supposed to happen.
It goes to motive to lie, it goes to
Understood, Your Honor.
objection is overruled.
Thank you, Judge. All right, so how are you and Mr. Smith getting along at the time of this incident?
At the time, he wasn't, because he had threatened my father, saying he was gonna beat my father up.
Okay,
This happened like some months before. I walked into my father's house one day,
mhm.
and I hear him upstairs in the room, and he arguing with somebody, so I'm like,
Who is he?
he was on the phone with Mr. Calvin
Who
Smith,
is he?
my father.
Thank you.
My father was arguing with Calvin Smith on the phone.
Okay, so a few months before this incident, you go over to your dad's house, and your dad's on the phone having an argument with somebody.
Yes, with Calvin Smith. So I didn't know it was
Okay,
happening.
hold on just a second. All right, so he's on the phone arguing with somebody.
Yeah,
Right, okay. All right, so then fast forward to, the date of this incident, you see Calvin Smith in your dad's house. Right?
yes,
Okay, and then you did you come downstairs and did you politely ask Mr. Smith, what are you doing here?
yes. I said, you're not welcome here.
Okay, all right,
I said, my father don't want you here. You just went off, you just cussed my daddy out
okay.
and threatening him.
So did you just politely say, Mr. Smith, you just cussed my daddy out?
No, I didn't. He already knew.
Okay, so did you politely say, Mr. Smith, what are you doing here?
Yeah,
Okay, all right, and then what if any, so your sister, who you referred to, that was Mr. Smith's wife at the time?
no, it was divorce.
Okay, that was so at this point, at the date of the incident, Kelvin Smith is your ex-brother.
Yes,
Okay, you guys didn't get along.
no,
Okay, and so when you saw him at the house, that kind of upset you a little bit?
yes,
Okay, you want to know what he's doing here, right?
yes.
Okay, all right. And so, what did your sister do after you said to Mr. Smith?
She said, I invited him here. He about to leave. Just let him just sit here for a minute.
Okay, all right,
And then that's when my father came down.
okay, all right. And so, does your dad, at some point, does your dad tell you to leave out of the house?
Yes.
Okay, and
He
so,
said, my father will tell me to get out of the situation. He said, just leave, I got this.
okay, so at some point, your dad tells you to get out of the house.
Yes,
Okay, did he tell Kelvin to sit down?
no,
Okay, all right, so then you get out of the house and then what? Did you go out of the house on your own?
yes,
Okay, just kind of calmly walk out of the house?
yes.
All right,
I was going to continue to do what my father told me to do, was to get the stuff out the car.
all right, but you stopped, instead of just going to get the stuff out the car, you stopped to say something to Kelvin Smith downstairs. All right, okay, so then you get outside, and do you remember telling the police that you tried to come back in the house?
No,
Okay, do you remember telling the police that, you tried to enter back in the house, but your sister Jerry Smith locked the door?
yeah, they locked me out.
Okay,
They
so,
locked me and my auntie. I was trying to let my auntie in the house.
okay,
My auntie had just pulled up, because we was getting ready to do the obituaries for my mother's funeral.
okay,
So my auntie, so I was trying to let my auntie, I was like, this is my auntie at the door. I said, auntie, they locked the door.
okay, so had your aunt been over at the house previous to
No,
that? That was her first?
No, when I was pulling up, she was pulling up. When I went outside, she was pulling up.
Okay, so before March 11, 2020, had your aunt ever been over at the house?
Yes,
objection or relevance.
That absolutely goes to, fabrication. 'Cause-
Whether the aunt was ever at the house?
Yes,
Same.
so, your aunt knocks on the door,
I knocked on the door.
you knocked on the door for your aunt.
Yeah,
Did you knock on the door so that you get back in the house yourself?
no,
Okay, all right. And so you said that, do you remember telling the police anything about your aunt being with you when you went to get back in the house?
no,
Okay. You just told the police that you tried to get back in the house and they locked the door.
yeah,
Okay. And today, this is your first time telling anybody that you tried to get back in to let your
I didn't
aunt
think
in.
my auntie was irreverent to this whole thing that happened.
You didn't think that at the time, or you don't
Yes.
think that now?
I didn't think that at the time.
Okay, but now you think it matters.
Not really, because I was just letting her and letting them know that she was there.
Okay, but you didn't tell anybody that, right?
Judge, objection, and answer, yes, sir.
I'm gonna move on from there. Okay, so you did tell the police that you tried to get back in the house,
Yes,
but they locked the door?
Yeah.
Okay, so then when you get outside, what did you do after you tried to get in the house and found that the door
went
was
back
locked?
across the street.
Okay, did you get in your car or you stand outside of your car?
I was standing at the back of my car.
Okay, why did you go outside?
That's what my father told me to do.
Okay, did you intend to stay outside or
Yes.
did you intend to leave?
Yeah, I was gonna go home.
Okay, so when you get out of the house intending to go home, did you get in the car?
No,
What did you do?
stand at the back of my car.
Okay,
I was just trying to make sure before I left and went home, I wanted to make sure my father was safe.
okay.
That's why I stayed.
Okay, so his 3 daughters are in the house though, right?
Yes, but they don't take care of my kid.
But you,
I do.
all right. So were you trying to leave or were you gonna stay there to make sure he
No.
was okay?
Judge Jackson has the answer.
He didn't answer.
Oh,
Is that your response to the objection, or were you talking to Ms. Britta?
I'm sorry for not directing my
Oh,
response to
okay.
the court. Okay, so. So were
Was
you,
he planning to leave?
thank you, Judge. So when you walked out of the house, were you intending to leave the location or were you intending to wait to check on your father?
Check on my father.
Okay, all right. So you didn't plan on leaving?
My whole intention was, I was over there and my father told me, he was like, before you leave, go get the pop in the water out the trunk. And I was like, well, so I'm gonna go get that and I'm going home. So I came downstairs and that's when I seen Smith sitting at the dining room table.
Okay. All right. Okay, so when you came over to the house, did you come over to the house by yourself?
Yes,
Okay, do you remember? Did you have a friend there with you by the name of Ray Ray?
yes.
Okay, so did you come to the house by yourself or did you come to the house with Ray?
He seen my car sitting outside.
All right,
Stopped.
okay, so then when you came to the house, Ray Ray wasn't there?
No, I was at my father's house for a while.
Okay, and then you get outside and Ray Ray just happens to be out there?
He live around the corner.
Okay,
He was on his way home, seeing my car sitting outside.
okay,
He always do that anytime. To this day, yesterday he did it.
okay, yesterday he saw you sitting out there and
He just seen my car parked outside my father's house and pulled up.
Okay, so did you, when you first went out of the house, you tried to get back in the house, did you see Ray Ray right away?
No,
Okay, at what point did you see Ray Ray?
when I went back, after I got back in, tried to go and let my auntie in,
Mm-hmm.
and I walked back across the street, that's when he pulled up. And he was like, what's going on? I was like, man, a whole bunch of stuff. I said, this guy just threatened my dad.
Okay, and, okay, so did you ever ask Ray Ray to give you a gun or anything like that?
Judge objection.
I'm gonna vote on that.
Question.
Okay, all right, so, do you remember saying something to Mr. in the house? Do you remember saying something to Mr. Smith about, if you're gonna hit me?
That's when he jumped in my face.
And, okay, do you remember what you said right there?
I said, you jumping in my face, you go hit me.
Okay, so were you trying to fight with him at that
No.
point? Okay, all right. Okay, so then, do you recall ever pushing Mr. Smith?
No,
Okay, do you recall ever hitting him at all?
no,
Okay, so do you remember how many times he struck you?
about 7 to 8 times,
Okay, did you ever try to stop him from hitting you?
so I was knocked out.
Okay, so do you know how many times you got hit before you got knocked out?
About 2 or 3 times.
Okay, do you remember ever trying to defend yourself?
No,
Okay,
he had on them rings, he had rings on every finger.
okay, do you remember ever trying to push him or anything?
No,
Okay,
I didn't put not one finger on him.
okay,
I just wanted him gone out of my father's house so we continue on planning my mother's funeral.
okay, I understand that. Okay, all right, so, Do you remember telling the police that you had to defend yourself?
Defend myself with what I ain't had.
Okay, but do you remember telling the police that you had to defend yourself? Okay, I'm gonna, you did make a written statement to the police, is that correct? Okay,
Is that a yes or no?
Yes,
okay, if I show you your statement, will that help you to remember whether or not you told the police you defend yourself? Okay.
I really don't remember. It's been so many years, and with this head injury, I be forgetting stuff, certain stuff.
Understood. Okay, my personal witness.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you just to take a minute to read, read those pages. And then don't say anything about what you're reading, okay? Just look up and let me know when you finish reading. Personal witness.
May,
Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you again, do you recall telling the police that you had to defend yourself?
Yes,
And so did you defend yourself?
no. It was just, 'cause I ain't get a chance to do nothing to him. By the time I got off the ground, they was in the car leaving. It was just fast.
Okay. Okay, so after you left the location, you said that you went to make a police report,
Like, went, home,
you went home?
and my wife took me to the hospital.
Okay, all right, so, after leaving the location that night, did you see Mr. Smith anymore?
After this, that,
So you saw Mr. Smith at the house. You didn't see him again until today.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you recall seeing, your nephew Julian at the house that night?
they all left.
Okay, but at some point you saw Julian at the house.
Yes,
Okay, so did you see Julian at all after you left the house?
no,
Okay, when did you see Julian?
a couple of years later,
Was he at the funeral or anything?
I didn't go to the car, I wasn't able to go.
Okay, all right. Okay. Okay, I don't have anything further.
can you redirect?
Very briefly, good. So, Mr. Garner, you testified, I'm sorry. Mr. Garner, you testified that, there were 3 individuals at the house by the name of Calvin Smith Jr., Kendall Jr., or Kendall Smith and Julius, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, whose kids are those?
Calvin Smith's son.
Okay, are those your sister kids as well?
Yeah.
Okay, and before this incident on March 11, 2020, had Mr. Smith been visiting your father's home?
No,
Say that again?
no,
Okay, and how often do you go to your father's house?
every day.
Okay, and you testified that you take care of your father, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and before the day of this incident, did Kelvin Smith Jr., Kendall Smith, or Julius Smith ever visit your father's home?
Yes, all the time.
They did?
When they came, they don't live here, so when they came to visit, that's where they stayed at. I have no problem with them.
Okay, and those are your nephews, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and you say they come there to visit, where do they come?
I don't know.
Do they live in Michigan?
No,
They don't live in Michigan, but when they visit Michigan, they come to your father's house to
Yeah.
stay
yeah,
during the duration of the trip?
yes,
Okay, when they come and visit during that duration, does Mr. Kelvin Smith come over?
no,
Okay, and at this point, or on March 11, 2020, you testified that your sister and Mr. Kelvin Smith were divorced?
yes.
Okay, how long had they been divorced at that point?
I have no record. My father just told me that they not together no more.
Okay, you recall if it was recent or,
Oh,
okay, but you just knew at that point they weren't
Yes.
together?
yes.
Okay, no further questions, Judge.
Mr. Gardner, you said you couldn't go to your mother's funeral, why?
In bad shape
What you mean?
from the jump,
Oh, you were in the hospital?
you know. I just didn't,
How long were you in the hospital?
I was there all that night. They took it. But I went, instead of when I had to file a police report.
You said you went to file a police report instead of going to your mother's funeral?
Yeah, that one. But I had just got out of the hospital. I had concussion, I had fall wrapped up, I had bandages all.
So your mother's funeral was the very next day
Yeah.
after this incident? So earlier you testified and you said that you all were at your father's house to do the obituary.
Yeah, that's my auntie was there too. She knew what it was that. That she worked at the church. The funeral was at the church that my auntie worked at.
What time was your mother's funeral? How long after you got out of the hospital did you go to the police department?
Right there.
So you left the hospital and you went straight to the police department. And when you left the police department, where did you go? How long were you at the police department?
Okay. I had to wait on it.
No, that's good. The situation that happened with you and Mr. Smith, was that at night or was that in the daytime?
And like in the evening, I got off work at 7 o'clock, so. It was like 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock at night? Okay, are there any questions based on my question, Ms. Ritter?
Just very briefly, Judge. So, Mr. Garner, you went to home and then you went to the hospital after, correct?
Yeah.
Do you recall how long you were at the hospital?
There all night. But I had to go, I had to do a concussion, I had to go through x-rays.
Okay, do you recall what time you left the hospital to go to the police department?
It was that morning.
So you recall if it was early hours in the morning? You
Yeah,
recall what time?
early.
Okay. No further questions.
Yes, please. So just really briefly, okay, so your aunt who came over to work on the obituary, was that your mom's sister?
It's like a friend of the family called her, she grew up, she raised.
Okay, a close friend of the family? Okay, and so, all right, so the only reason you were trying to get that, when you found out the door was locked,
Judge, objection outside of the scope.
that is going directly to a question that was asked by the,
Which question?
as to what time,
I didn't ask anything about an aunt.
that the aunt was working on the obituary.
No, I didn't ask about that. I said, I asked him, purpose of going over to the home was to, do the obituary.
Okay,
And
that's
then
it.
he said, yes, that they was gonna do it the same day because the aunt worked at the church. But I didn't ask any question about the aunt working at the church.
I don't wanna know about her working at the church, I wanna know when she came over to work on the obituary. So when I was asking you about were you trying to get back in the house when you're home, you found that the doors locked, you said the only reason you found out the doors locked is because you're trying to let your aunt in.
Yes.
About what time was that?
Something about early, it was about 8 o'clock. It
Around
wasn't
8.
past 8:30.
So sometime between 8 and 8:30, and the funeral was the next morning.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you, sir. You may step down. Well, I'm sorry, Ms. Rita, you get the last one.
No further questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. You may step down. And if you want to remain in the courtroom, remain. Yes. Any other witness on behalf of the people?
Yes, Judge, at this time, we would like to call Officer Marcel Reed.
Okay. Step forward, me, officer, and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Right, you may be seated.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Officer Reed. Officer Reed, yep, there's a microphone and it is adjustable, so just adjust it and keep your voice up so the court reporter can hear you, okay?
Yes,
Thank you. Officer Reed, can you state your full name for the record?
Marcel Reed,
Okay, and Officer Reed, where are you employed?
Detroit Police Department.
And is that the correct ranking officer?
Police officer, yes.
Yeah, okay. And how long have you been employed with the Detroit Police Department?
9 years.
9 years? Okay. And Officer Reed, I want to go back to March 11, 2020, were you employed with the Detroit Police Department at that time?
Yes,
Okay. And do you recall, working in your official capacity on that day?
Yes.
Okay, and where were you working in your official capacity? Were you on patrol or were you at?
I was working inside the precinct. Yes.
Okay, and on that day, well, tell me, what happened on that day? Did someone come in to make a report?
Yes.
Okay, do you recall, and it's yes or no, do you recall what that report was about?
That's all.
Okay, and do you recall, I know it's some time ago, but do you recall, how that person who came in and made the report, do you recall how they looked?
I cannot.
Okay, and when that person came in to make that report, did you observe anything about that person's physical appearance?
Due to my report, yes.
Okay,
I can't remember.
okay, if I gave you a chance to look at your report, would that help refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Judgment approved?
Man.
So I'm sorry, I just handed you a copy of the report that you made, just read that over, and then once you're done, this will go. Okay, now after having an opportunity to review your report, and you can put that face down on the ledge, yes, thank you. After having an opportunity to review your report, do you recall if you observed anything about the person's physical appearance that made?
Yes.
Excuse me, Officer Reed, by any chance, do you have an ink pen in your hand? No?
Not in my, I don't know.
Oh.
Yes, sir, sorry.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I ain't never heard Courtney typing it on here. Okay,
Oh.
proceed. I thought you was clicking at me,
Oh,
that's
no,
why.
ma'am. No.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay.
So, Officer Reed, what do you recall about that person's physical appearance?
I remember a small laceration above that.
Okay, do you recall anything else about their appearance?
Slightly blood, I think, it was like
Okay,
Say that again, I apologize, I didn't.
blood. It was
Oh,
blood.
okay, thank you.
okay,
Dried up blood, I'm sorry.
dried up blood, okay. And, what did you do after this person came in to make a report?
I listened to their claim against it or whatever the assault was about, and I
Okay.
typed it up and sent it off.
Okay, now, did you do anything else regarding the incident?
No.
Okay, now, do you recall who this person, and it's a yes or no question, do you recall who this person got into this, physical altercation with?
Yes, believe the victims told me it was his ex brother-in-law.
Okay, and do you recall anyone else coming in to make a report about something similar to this report?
No.
Okay. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Officer Reed.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so do you remember having this conversation with Mr. Garner about what happened, why he was making a report?
Vague.
Okay, if you look at your report, will that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Okay, could you take a look at your report? Okay, so do you remember, Mr. Gardner telling you that he, told his brother-in-law he wasn't wanted over at the house?
Judge objection, then cross the reason.
I said, he remembers it.
But even if he remembers it, wouldn't it be hearsay?
If he says, yes, I remember, I'm not asking you to tell me what he said, I'm just asking if he remembers.
Yes, you are. You said, do you remember Mr. Gardner telling you that his brother-in-law or somebody wasn't wanted
I
there?
did, you're
You
right,
did,
okay,
yes.
you're right, I did that.
Sustained.
Okay, all right, well, let me skip that altogether. Can you tell us again about the injuries that you observed on Mr. Gardner?
Yes, a small laceration above the eyebrow.
Okay, all right, I don't have anything further.
Any redirect?
No, thank you, Judge.
I have a couple of questions. Do you recall, receiving any documents, paperwork, from the person who came in to make that report?
I do not.
Additionally, do you, know what time you took the report?
That's how I cannot.
And would it be reflected on your report? What
Yes, it will.
time that you took the report?
Yes,
And if we're looking at your report, refresh your recollection as to what time you took the report.
yes.
Can you do that for me? All right, do you know what time you took the report?
Yes, 22:36.
And what time is that?
I'm 36.
11:36 PM?
PM, yes.
Um. 22:36, 11:36 PM, that's, that is, no, cause that's, I don't know military either, that's why I said, no, 24, but no, you. Ooh, look at Officer Graham giving it, testimony on the record, no, thank you, Officer Graham, no, thank
No
you.
objection.
Good, I know, that's like 10, so, cause 20, only thing I know is 12 and 24, that's what I can tell you, really. So-
10:36.
That would be like 10:36 PM
10:36 PM, yes.
on March 11th.
Yes.
When, I have one other question. I said I had two, but I do have one other question. Please indulge me. When the person came in, if you recall, because I know you said you recall, did they have like bandage on their head or something? Do you remember any bandage on their head?
Don't.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions based on my questions that I asked?
I do have a brief question.
Okay, thank
So, Officer Reed, you had indicated it was 10:36 AM,
PM,
PM, I'm sorry. So it was dark outside when this person came in?
yes.
Okay. Do you recall what your shift was that day working this?
It had to be the midnight shift. It was that, was 10:30, like, came in, started at 10:30
Okay,
PM, so.
so this person came in at 10:36 PM, right after you started your shift?
Yes.
Okay. No further questions.
Any questions based on my question?
No, thank you.
Thank you, officer. You may step down. You're free to go.
Thank you.
Any further questions on behalf of the people?
We don't have any further.
I'm sorry, I said it.
I know it's been.
She loves to correct, right? The officer is handing something. Any further witnesses on behalf of people? People having no further witnesses, do people rest?
At this time, the people.
Okay, anything on behalf of the defense?
I need a brief moment.
Yes.
Okay. Can I step outside of my plane?
You may.
Thank
I take my step.
Okay.
And you ain't taking the second one. Who's in that fourth one today? That's who taking it. Yeah, I told them to make sure the staff is there. It's not my staff, it's his staff. I'm covering for Judge Giles. No, call Miss, you wanna call Miss Knight?
Hold on, I know, I was just looking to see if you had a, yeah.
Yeah, he has a report. I don't know, who's it, but it could be somebody on rotation.
Mhm.
I don't- Me, Hurley. Okay, well, I'm.
Yeah, no one responded, I'm the only one saying it.
And do you remember when, years ago, you did a road exam, and how, like, God forbid you tried to.
If I tried to take it.
And so now I'm not taking.
No.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to have one.
All right, well, thank you.
No, the person that's in Portland was coughing, I said, I want. Who they tell you?
Ms. Strickler. That's Ms. Knight, just
Okay. What's her?
Ms. Knight?
Yeah.
54336.
All right, Ms. Stevenson, anything on behalf of the defense?
At this time, yes, thank you, Your Honor. At this time, defense will call Kelvin Smith.
Mr. Smith, no. Why is it not on for you? Whatever, okay. Sir, state your name.
Kelvin W. Smith.
Mr. Smith, your lawyer has indicated that you intend to give up your right to remain silent and testify on your own behalf. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir, has anyone threatened you in any way, promised you anything that was not placed on the record to get you to give up your right to remain silent and testify in this case?
No, Your Honor.
Do you understand, sir, that anything you say on the witness stand, the court will use that in its decision with respect to your guilt or innocence?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand, sir, that although you are very much so encouraged to consult with your attorney with respect to your decision to whether or not to testify, do you understand that the ultimate decision is yours and yours alone, that you have to decide whether or not you are going to testify? You understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you consult with your lawyer?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the decision to testify, is it yours?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You may step forward and raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may be seated.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon again, Mr. Smith. Please just state your name for the record.
Kelvin W. Smith.
Okay, and getting right to it, on March 11th of 2020, were you present at 14956 Greenview in the city of Detroit?
Yes.
And that location is where your father-in-law was living at the time?
Yes.
How did you happen to be at that location?
My wife called me when I lived in Texas.
Mhm.
She said, "Hey, my mother passed away. Would you go get the boys in Tennessee and bring them up?" That's all right, no problem. Came out of that last respect. I
Okay,
drove.
so how'd you get to Detroit from where you were?
I drove from Texas to Tennessee, and then I picked the boys up. My youngest son was already there with his mother.
Okay,
I drove to Tennessee and arrived to Detroit, Michigan.
okay, so then when you get over to your father-in-law's house, do you know if anybody else was there?
I didn't know who was in the house until I got into the house. I just saw a couple cars outside.
Okay, all right, so at some point, you come into contact with Edward Gardner, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, how do you know who Edward Garner is?
He's my wife's brother.
Okay, all right. And so you guys, at the time of this incident, do you call him
No.
Edward, or what do you guys call him?
They call him TT.
T. Okay, all right. So, did you see TT at the house? Did you see Edward Gardner at the house that night?
Not until I got into the house, I didn't see him.
Okay, when's the first time you came into contact with Mr.
And when he was coming down the stairs,
Okay, and so what happens when he comes down the stairs? Then?
I was sitting at the dining room table. He saw me, started saying, "What the fuck you doing to my?"
You know, you're free to use profanity as long as you are repeating what was said that day.
Yes.
Okay.
What you doing? Why the fuck you in my dad's house?
And then what happens after he says that?
I just looked at him and just brushed him off because he didn't invite me. His wife invited. His sister invited me. My time is my wife,
Mhm.
and so he just kept going.
So let me ask you this, when he says that to you, he's coming down the stairs, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and where are you when Mr. Gardner asks you that question?
I am sitting at the dining room table at the end, looking towards the stairs.
Okay, and so what did he do after he said that to you?
He kept saying, "My dad wants
Judge,
someone."
objection, hearsay. I do apologize, I was writing and now what was the question?
Actually, okay, let me rephrase it.
Okay,
Okay, did you guys have some type of an argument after Mr. Garner asks you that question?
Yeah, we were still in the dining room.
Okay, all right. So, how long does this argument between you and Mr. Garner last?
All right, as he got up to the bottom of the stairs, I was still sitting at the dining room table. All
Okay,
right, by that time, his father started coming downstairs.
Okay.
Us arguing.
and then what happened?
He came towards me, I was sitting down, I stood up.
And then what happened?
His dad got between them and said, "This is my freaking house."
Judge, objection to hearsay.
No, okay, so at some point, Mr. Garner Senior
Correct.
stands between you and Mr. Garner, correct?
Judge, objection to leave.
overruled, she was just repeating.
Okay, so, what happened after that?
After that, he pushed me down and said, "Sit down, you said you're welcome."
Who pushed you?
His, Mr. Gardner Senior said, "Sit down, you're welcome."
Objection, Judge.
Okay, so don't tell me what he said, don't tell me what anybody said.
Sounds to me like you concede the objection.
And that's the sentence.
All right,
Okay, so don't tell me what anybody said, okay? It's challenging, but just try not to say what anybody else was saying. What did anyone do after Mr. Garner Senior stands between you and Mr. Garner?
Well, pushed me back down.
Who did?
Mr. Gardner Senior pushed me down towards the seat.
Okay, all right, and then what happens? Try not to say what anybody said, just tell me what happened.
At the time, Tyrone left out the
Who is Tyrone?
Gardner,
Okay,
left out the kitchen door, which used to be, if I'm sitting down right now, is to the left of me.
okay,
Out the kitchen door, went outside.
and then what happened after Mr. Garner goes outside?
The sisters, I don't remember which one, locked the door.
Okay, and then what happened?
Tyrone Gardner Jr. was trying to come in the front door.
Okay, how do you know that Mr. Edward Garner was trying to come into the front?
well, that assumes a fact, not an evidence.
Absolutely.
So,
who is, when you refer to Tyrone Garner, who are you talking about?
Say again.
Who are you talking about when you say Tyrone?
Tyrone Edward Gardner, sitting right there.
Okay, all right. Okay, so how do you know that Mr. Garner was trying to get back into the house?
Because my son, by that time, my son walked up towards the front door.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Judge,
looked out.
objection, that causes speculation.
overruled right now. I don't know, but he's speculating, he's telling me how he knows. So we'll get to somebody's walking to the front door.
My son, by that time was at the front door,
Uh-huh,
and he looked out the top of the door and saw his uncle, Mr. Tyrone Gardner, out there at the door. And he said, "TT's out the front door trying to come in."
okay, so did you see anything, yes or no, or hear anything that caused you to believe that Mr. Garner was trying to get back in the house?
You know, when you hear them.
Okay, so you heard someone doing something with the door?
Right.
Okay, and you testified that the door had been locked by somebody else inside?
Correct.
Okay, all right, so what did you do after, you perceived that Mr. Garner was trying to get back in the house?
I stayed there for another, I don't know, time was going by, not long. I told my boys that, let's go to the hotel. I don't want to be here. I came to pay my last respect
Okay.
to my wife's mother. And
Okay.
so we proceeded out the front.
Okay, and then what happened? You
It
said
was,
we perceived that.
it was my, sons, Julian, Jordan, Kendall, and, Kelvin.
Okay, and then what happens as you guys are going out the door?
As we,
Hold on, Mr. Smith, make sure you let her completely finish her question for two reasons, so I'll know what question is actually being asked, and then the court reporter has to take down what you're saying, and both are kind of talking over each other. What is your question?
So the question I will ask is,
You asked him who is we, and he told you who he was.
and so what happens when you and your sons who were with you, what happens when you guys get outside? If anything, did anything?
As we was approaching the car, Mr. Tyrone Gardner Jr. started mouthing off, started talking.
Okay, as you're approaching what car?
My car is about to leave.
Okay, and then what happened?
My second son, Calvin Smith, told
So
him.
let's not say what anybody else said.
Okay, well,
Okay, so what happened, without saying what anybody else was saying?
just back and forth arguing, and we got in the middle of the street,
Okay,
still arguing,
okay,
and then pushed, and then
okay, so pushed, who pushed who?
Tyrone Gardner,
Pushed whom?
Tyrone Gardner,
Who did Tyrone Gardner push?
myself.
So Mr. Gardner is somewhere on the street, and the two of you, did you come into contact with each other?
We came close.
Okay, and what happened when did he approach you or did you approach
It
him?
was both approaching each other. We were walking towards each other.
Okay, and then you testified that Mr. Gardner did what?
He pushed.
And then what happened after? Are you saying that he pushed you?
Yes, he pushed me, and then the altercation.
Okay, what happened in the altercation?
So when he pushed, I took a swing at him, hit him with it, my fist.
Okay, did he ever hit you?
No,
Okay, and then what happened after he got hit?
he was struggling, both were struggling. And then after a while, then he was on the ground, I let him go. I went to my car.
Okay, all right. So, did you see anybody else outside when you went outside when Mr. Gardner came?
Yes, I saw a gentleman out there standing. I can describe what he looked like, but that's all right. I'd say he was there with him.
I'm sorry.
Yes, it was another gentleman out there with him.
Okay, that gentleman, was he in the car, out of the car?
He was standing outside.
Okay, all right. Okay, I don't have anything further at this time. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. So, how would you describe when Mr. Gardner was in the house? And as he's coming down the stairs, how would you describe Mr. Garner's demeanor?
Aggressive.
Okay, and did you have any other observations about Mr. Garner?
Well, you can see he was, I don't know if he was drinking, high or smoke, but
Okay,
Judge, that's close speculation.
so, okay, so the response or the entire question?
The response,
Okay,
the response.
okay, all right. So, try not to draw any conclusions, okay? But tell us, what did he look like to you? What did he appear, not, don't draw any conclusions, but did he look different or anything like that?
when he noticed me, his demeanor changed,
How so?
aggression. Because as soon as he saw me, he said, get the fuck out of my house. Why are you in my fucking bad house? And so on and so on and so on and so on.
Okay.
Record, I'll object to your.
I don't have a response to that. Okay, so, did you have any observations about his demeanor other than the fact that he was aggressive?
No.
Okay, all right, I don't have anything further at this time, thank you.
Cross examination.
Yes, Judge. Good afternoon, Mrs. Smith. So, Mr. Smith, I'm just gonna ask you a couple clarifying questions, and if you need me to repeat my question or you don't understand my question, just let me know, okay? Is that it?
Yes,
Okay, so, Mrs. Smith, You testified that at the time of this incident, you lived in Texas, correct?
I still look.
You still live in Texas, okay? And you testified that your wife asked you to come to your father-in-law's house?
Yes,
Okay, so what's your wife's name? I'm sorry.
Jerry.
Is she in the courtroom?
No,
Okay. Is she here today?
No.
Okay, at the time, well, are you still married to?
yes,
I'm sorry,
yes,
can I finish my question first, Mr. Smith? Thank you. Are you still married to Miss Jerry Smith?
yes, I am.
And at the time of this incident, you were married to Miss Jerry Smith?
Yes,
Okay, but you live in Texas and she lives in Michigan?
correct.
Okay.
Can
No,
the
she
parties
don't.
approach? The attorneys. In front of the, on the side. Officer Krabs, can you approach? To my exam. So. Yeah, lawyers. All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. So I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, let me re-ask my question. You live in Texas and your wife lives in Michigan?
No, in Tennessee.
So you live in Texas and your wife lives in Tennessee?
Correct.
So you don't live together?
What's the relevance?
I'm sorry, Judge, I was
Okay,
wrong.
yes.
Thank you. So, Mr. Smith, I want to go back to the incident that happened at your father-in-law's house. How long have you been married to your wife at that point?
Maybe 30 years.
Say that again?
30.
30 years? Okay, now during that 30-year marriage, how was your relationship with your father-in-law?
It was fine until we separated.
Okay. And at that time, were you separated on the day of the incident?
Yes,
Okay. And how would you describe your relationship with Mr. Gardner?
No.
Say that again?
none,
So you don't have a relationship with Mr. Edward Gardner?
no,
You never had a relationship with him?
no,
Okay. And before the incident on the day in question, did you have a altercation with Mr. Gardner?
repeat your question again.
Did you have an altercation with Mr. Gardner before this day?
No,
Okay. Did you ever speak to him?
don't have no contact with.
You don't have any contact with him?
No.
Okay, so let's go to, when you arrived at your father-in-law's house. Did you know Mr. Gardner was present?
No,
Okay, and you said you were, or you testified that you were sitting at the dining room table?
correct.
Okay, and who was in the room at this point?
At the time I came to the house, it was the sisters and my wife.
Okay, and where was Calvin Smith Jr., Julian Smith, and Kendall Smith?
They were in the other side of the living room.
So
I'm
they
in the
were,
dining room, they was in the living room.
okay, and is the dining room and living room right next to each other?
Somewhat.
Okay.
Stairs in the middle.
Okay, and, at what point did you see Mr. Gardner?
When you walk down the stairs.
Okay, you didn't know he was up there,
No,
so you didn't know he would be there?
no, I just saw cars outside.
Okay. And what did you do after Mr. Gardner walked downstairs?
I didn't do anything.
Okay, you didn't say anything to him?
No,
Okay. And when Mr. Gardner went outside, what did you do?
I was still in the house when we went outside.
Okay, so you didn't try to go outside?
No,
Okay, and how did you end up outside when you guys came into contact with each other?
we was leaving, going to the hotel.
Okay, so when you say we, who are you referring to?
My sons,
Okay, so you and your sons decided to leave at this point.
correct,
Okay, and where was Mr. Gardner when you guys left?
across the street.
Okay, at this point, did he say anything to you?
Yeah,
So he said something to you as you were leaving?
correct.
Okay, and you testified that you started walking toward Mr. Gardner?
We
correct?
both started working towards each other.
Well, you started walking towards Mr. Gardner, correct? In his
Correct.
direction?
Right.
You did? Okay, and why did you walk towards him?
For once, my car was on the side of the street, and by the time I got there, he was on the other side of the street. So I had to walk towards him. But we stopped, and we started arguing.
So you didn't testify that the car was in the driveway?
No, I never said that.
Okay, so where was your car parked?
On the side of the house, on
On
the
the,
street,
is it in front of the house,
side of the house,
on the side of the house?
yes.
And where was Mr. Gardner's car parked?
I don't know where his car was parked. I saw cars there. He was on the other side of the street.
So you're going to the side of the street, he's on the other side,
Yes,
but you somehow came in contact with him face to face?
correct.
Okay. And you testified that Mr. Gardner pushed you
That's correct.
and you swung on
That's correct.
him? Okay, where did you swing on him?
Where?
Yeah,
Towards the head?
okay, how many times did you swing on him?
I don't know.
You don't know how many times you swung on him?
No.
Was it more than once?
Yeah, I can say it more than once.
Was it more than 4 times?
Maybe 5.
Maybe 5?
Yeah.
Okay. And you testified at this point, Mr. Gardner did not hit you?
No.
He did not hit you?
No, he was swinging, but none of his punches connect.
Okay, you didn't testify to that. You testified that he didn't try to hit you. That's what you told Ms. Stevens, that he didn't hit you.
Objection, Your Honor, I think that's a mischaracterization of the testimony. I asked him,
That's enough. That's great. Response?
I'll rephrase the question.
Thank you.
Did Mr. Gardner hit you when
No.
you hit him?
No.
Okay. And what happened after this altercation with Mr. Gardner?
I got up and left.
When you say got up, were you on the ground?
Well, I'll just say I stopped. I stood up and I told my boys, let's go and just leave.
Okay, you stood up. So what position were you in when you standing up?
He was down, we fell down, but I had him down and then I stopped, I got up. And I said, let's go.
So he was on the ground and you were over him?
Correct.
Okay. And how long did that altercation last? Do you recall?
No, I don't know. It wasn't that long.
Okay. And did you see Mr. Gardner after that?
After the
This
incident,
altercation, yep.
no. Oh, stand corrected. I did
When did you see Mr. Gardner?
at the traffic light when I was leaving.
Okay. Can I have one moment, please?
You may.
I have no further questions, Karen.
You need to redirect.
yes, Your Honor. So you saw Mr. Gardner at the traffic light when you were leaving?
Yes,
Okay, did anything happen at the traffic light that you recall?
yes, he called my name. I looked
Just
up.
objection or relevance?
Did,
This is after, this. I'm sorry, objection.
Any response?
that was her question, Judge.
Yeah, but she didn't ask what happened or what was said.
She asked if if they saw each other after the incident.
She did. And now she's objecting to the relevance of what happened when they saw each other.
Of her, she's out objecting to the relevance.
Ms.
of
Simpson,
her
how is-
question?
Yes, because had you objected to her question, I would have sustained it.
Okay.
So
then-
I don't care about the fact that she is now objecting to your question.
Okay, nothing further.
Okay, makes, oh no, hold on before you take a step down. I do have one question for you. Did you go to the funeral?
When the altercation started, I called my wife and told her that, since what happened, I don't want no other altercation with her brother. And I left the next day,
Left the state.
left the state.
Okay, thank you. make that down. Anything further on behalf of the defense?
Defense rests, Your Honor.
Any rebuttal on behalf of the people?
No rebuttal.
Are we ready for closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ready for closing now.
All right, on behalf of the people.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Your Honor, again, as the people say in their opening statements, that this is a case between ex-brother-in-laws or brother-in-laws. And the testimony from the complainant witness is important because the testimony from Mr. Garner laid out the relationship between the two. Mr. Garner testified that he didn't have a problem with Mr. Smith until there was an issue between Mr. Garner's father and Mr. Smith. And Mr. Garner testified that he went over to his father's house on March 11, 2020, and he goes over to his father's house all the time as he testified that he takes care of his father. When he got there to check on his father, Mr. Garner testified that Mr. Smith was present, and Mr. Garner testified that he asked his sister, who was the wife of Mrs. Smith, what is he doing? So Judge, that plays into a couple things, and usually the people go in order of the testimony, but I'm gonna skip around a little bit, Judge, because it's important that I stop there and segue to the statements, or I'm sorry, the testimony from Mr. Smith. Now, Mr. Smith testified that he lived in Texas at the time, he still does. He testified that he came to show support for his wife, his sister, Mr. Garner. And he also testified that when the court asked him a question, he testified that he didn't even go to the table. He testified that he didn't have a relationship with Mr. Garner, and he testified that he was here to show support for his wife's mother. Now, I point that out to the court, Judge, because if Mr. Smith was there in support of his wife's mother passing away, I think it's pretty important to be there in support of the wife and go to the funeral, opposed to pointing out this issue and this incident with Mr. Garner. And that's important because, Judge, it goes to show that Mr. Smith was there anticipating this altercation, this physical altercation with Mr. Garner. He was there, he knew Mr. Garner would be there. He testified that he was married to his wife for 30 years. So it is relevant, Judge, that he knows the relationship between Mr. Garner and his father. He knew Mr. Garner would be there. He knew that the family would come together in support of the mother passing away and his mother-in-law passing away. So Mr. Smith went there anticipating this altercation with Mr. Garner. They had this altercation, Judge, that spilled out outside. Mr. Smith testified that he went outside and was walking towards his car. He testified his car was parked on the side of the house. But he also testified that Mr. Garner's car was parked across the street, which is two different directions, Judge. The court is painting this picture. So how is it that Mr. Garner and Mr. Smith come into contact with each other in the middle of the street? Well, Judge, according to the testimony from Mr. Garner, he was standing across the street by his vehicle, and Mr. Smith approached him. And when he came in contact with Mr. Smith, he punched him with a closed fist multiple times. Now, going back again, Judge, to Mr. Smith's testimony, because I'm doing a compare and contrast at this point, Judge. If we go back to Mr. Smith's testimony, Mr. Smith testified that they met in the street and he punched him, and he didn't remember maybe 4 or 5 times at this point. He also testified at that point, Judge, after the altercation, he got up, and if the court remembered, the people asked him, well, what do you mean you got up? Were you on the ground? He said, no, Mr. Garner was on the ground and he was on top of him getting up, and he left the scene, Judge. At this time, Judge, the Officer Reed, who was the desk officer working duty at the 8th precinct on the day of the incident, testified that Mr. Garner came in, he noticed the laceration above his eye, he noticed that there was some dried up blood, and Mr. Garner made this report to the police. The officer also testified that no one else after Mr. Garner came to the precinct to make a report about this similar incident that took place between Mr. Smith and Mr. Garner. And Judge, the people point that out because that goes to show that the testimony from the officer corroborates the testimony from Mr. Garner, because Mr. Garner testified that Mr. Smith is the one who approached him and started this physical altercation, opposed to Mr. Garner being the aggressor. Now, Your Honor, the people did admit, people proposed exhibit one, which was a picture of Mr. Gardner and the injury that he sustained. And that exhibit corroborates what Mr. Gardner said on the stand regarding his injuries. Your Honor, the people also admitted people's exhibit two, which was the discharge papers from Beaumont. And the discharge papers from Beaumont corroborates the actual timeline and the injuries that Mr. Gardner testified that he sustained during this altercation. Now, Judge, those two exhibits again corroborates what Mr. Gardner testified as to what happened on that day and where did he go following the incident. Now, Judge, the people want the court to take into consideration the testimony from Mr. Gardner and the officer and also those exhibits. But also, Judge, I want the people to take into consideration and take into the facts that Mr. Smith was there to have this altercation with Mr. Gardner. Mr. Smith was there to start a physical altercation with Mr. Gardner because he had no business being there other than the fact that he was showing support for the mother-in-law passing away. He was, which he testified that he did not. And Judge, that's important, which goes to show the cooperation of what Mr. Gardner said during his testimony. And which goes to show that Mr. Gardner was actually the one who was assaulted by Mr. Smith. And Mr. Gardner was simply there in support of his family during the time that their mother passed away. And Your Honor, with that being said, Judge, I ask the court to take that into consideration, the evidence that the people had admitted as people proposed exhibit 1 and 2, and the testimony from the complaining witness, Mr. Gardner, and the officer, Officer Reed. Now, asking the court to return a verdict of guilty for count 1 aggravated assault. Thank you.
All right, on behalf of the defense.
Okay, so, I guess I'm having a little bit of difficulty understanding based upon the evidence that came forth.
Can you step a little bit towards the mic?
Why?
Raise
Okay.
your voice up, because I'm.
Okay, why Mr. Smith would have driven from Texas to Tennessee to Michigan for the sole and express purpose of having a confrontation with Mr. Gardner. I don't think that that's supported by the evidence. I think that the evidence is clear that Mr. Smith is there because he's been married to a woman for 30 years, because he has 4 children with that woman, because their grandmother has passed away, and he's there to do what he's supposed to do, support his family, or be there in recognition of his mother-in-law's passing. So I don't think there's anything strange about that at all, and I don't think there's anything to suggest that Mr. Smith went there so he could get into some kind of fight with Mr. Gardner. I think the opposite is demonstrated by the evidence that it was Mr. Gardner who, for whatever reason, that just didn't get flushed out here on this record today, has conflict with Mr. Smith. And it's Mr. Gardner who makes the first inquiry as to what Mr. Smith is even doing there. And it's Mr. Gardner who is behaving so aggressively that his sisters and his father have him leave out of the house. They don't tell Mr. Smith to get out of the house. They tell Mr. Gardner to get out of the house. And then when Mr. Gardner does get out of the house, they lock the door because of Mr. Gardner's very aggressive behavior directed toward Mr. Smith, which puts Mr. Smith on guard. And it should. Mr. Gardner is put out of the house and the door is locked. And we know the door is locked because he said the door is locked and he tried to get back into the house. Now, I asked him if he told the police anything about, the door being locked, and he says that he did. And I asked him if he told the police anything about finding out the door was locked because he was trying to let somebody else in the house. And that's not reflected in his statement. He makes mention of that, first mention of that when he comes to court today. And I think the reason he didn't make any mention of that at the time of his report to the police is because it didn't happen. He knows that the door is locked. Not because he's trying to let anybody else in the house, who comes over to the house, according to his testimony, between 8 o'clock and 8:30 PM, the night before a funeral, to put an obituary together. That is not credible testimony and doesn't make sense. And I don't think it's what happened. Mr. Garner is so aggressive that his own family members, who he having the burden of proof, not here to support him, locked him out of the house because of how he was acting. And when he's outside, according to the testimony that's come out on the record, it's a considerable amount, a few minutes at least past. I think Mr. Smith testified it's about 20 minutes before anybody else comes out of the house. Mr. Garner is still outside. And he's out there, we would argue, kind of hanging out, lying in wait. If he's this peacemaker that he wants this court to believe, I don't know what he does, why he's still hanging around out there when Mr. Smith and his sons come out of the house. And it is Mr. Garner who approaches Mr. Smith, and it is Mr. Garner who engages in a physical confrontation with Mr. Smith. So at this point, Mr. Smith has taken the stand and he's testified that Mr. Garner was behaving aggressively toward him and that he did strike Mr. Garner. After Mr. Garner pushes him, after Mr. Garner has been in the house cursing at him, after Mr. Garner has been in the house yelling at him, after Mr. Garner has been trying to get back into the house after his sisters have locked him out of the house, that Mr. Garner's aggression continues and Mr. Smith does strike him. And Mr. Smith did testify that he hit Mr. Garner about 5 times, but this concussion and all this other stuff that Mr. Garner is talking about is not supported by the discharge papers that show up in court, and is not supported by the officer's testimony who sees Mr. Garner within hours of this incident that is supposed to have taken place. Sees Mr. Garner with a small laceration over his eye. So, whatever happened wouldn't have happened if Mr. Garner had not come down the stairs and started in with Mr. Smith. Only because Mr. Garner Sr. is not here to tell us that he didn't want Mr. Smith in his house. The sisters are not here to corroborate Mr. Garner's testimony. It's Mr. Garner who didn't want Mr. Smith at the house. And it's Mr. Garner who starts in with Mr. Smith. And Mr. Garner's testimony is in question. He's starting to act aggressively when he starts yelling at and telling Mr. Smith that he's not supposed to be here. They put him out of the house and he tries to get back in the house. And he doesn't find out that he's locked out of the house when he's trying to let somebody else in. He finds out because he's there trying to get back in the house. His aggression continues. He's admitted that there's somebody else out there with him. Mr. Smith doesn't know what's going on, but he does testify that Mr. Garner is acting aggressive. And we're gonna ask, therefore, that the court find that people have not met the limit, find Mr. Smith not guilty.
Any rebuttal?
Very quickly, Judge. So, Judge, people notice how the defense counsel points out how aggressive Mr. Garner was acting on that day, and how Mr. Garner started the altercation. But if the court recalls Mr. Smith's testimony, I forgot the question that people asked, but Mr. Smith's testimony is that he started walking towards Mr. Garner, or they were walking towards each other in the middle of the street, which is confusing to the people, Judge, because if Mr. Garner was acting this aggressively, why would Mr. Smith be walking towards Mr. Garner to meet him in the street for whatever reason? Another thing, Judge, Mr. Smith testified that when they came into contact with each other, Mr. Garner pushed him, but he didn't hit him. Now, the way that this characterization of this aggression from Mr. Gardner is being placed in front of this court is if Mr. Gardner was this aggressive, why didn't he hit Mr. Smith? Why was Mr. Smith on top of Mr. Gardner if he was this aggressive? Another thing, Judge, is that Mr. Smith testified that he didn't attend the funeral because he told his wife that he didn't want any altercations with his brother. That's interesting to the people, Judge, because if he had that same mentality when Mr. Gardner was acting so aggressive in the house, it wouldn't have been nothing for Mr. Smith to have left that location and continue about whatever he was doing that day. Now, Judge, we're not here to discuss what altercations or problems this family have amongst each other, and people are not here to try to sort that out, Judge. But what the people want the court to understand is that the testimony from Mr. Smith does not add up as to what defense counsel theory is of what happened. And what is the truth, Judge, is that Mr. Gardner, who testified that he came to his father's house, they were preparing for the mother's funeral, he came into contact with Mr. Smith, and he admitted, he testified that he asked what he was doing. This altercation spilled out outside. Mr. Gardner was outside by his car. Mr. Smith came out, and this was the testimony from Mr. Smith. His car is parked on the side of the street, the side of the house. And he didn't know where Mr. Gardner's car was. But if you're walking in opposite directions and one person's standing in front of the house and the other person's going on the side, how all of a sudden the two come in the middle of the street? Judge, it doesn't add up and it doesn't make sense. And I'm asking the court again to take the testimony from the complaining witness, the evidence and the testimony from Officer Reed, and return a verdict of guilty of count one aggravated assault.
Court has had an opportunity to consider the testimony. People have the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt that on or about. Oh, this is the wrong file. I was gonna say, why is there a Bryant over? Okay. On or about March 11, 2020. Right day COVID hit us, right? COVID hit us on March 11, 2020, because I worked on March 11th and everybody had to go home, and then we worked until March 13th, but then they said, oh no, y'all could die. We ain't gonna let y'all keep coming in here. Okay, so that was right at the beginning of COVID. And then the people have to prove that on or about that date at or near the location of 14956 Greenview in the city of Detroit within the county of Wayne, that Kelvin Smith committed one count of assault aggravated as to Edward Gardner. In order to meet his burden, the people submitted 2 witnesses, 2 exhibits, and then the defendant gave up his right to remain silent. And he testified. The court makes the following conclusions and renders the following verdict. And I'm going to get right to it because there is an exam waiting for me. As always, when considering matters, as the lone juror, I am always reminded and remind myself of jury instructions that I read on a regular basis to the jury. And I often like to also read some of those jury instructions into the record. But of course, especially in a case where there's only 2 fact witnesses, one is on the side of the people and one is on the side of the defense, the court has to consider the credibility of those witnesses in deciding whether or not the people have met its burden. And in doing so, the court is reminded of jury instruction 3.6, which indicates that you do not have to accept or reject everything a witness said. You are free to believe all, none, or part of any person's testimony. In deciding which testimony you believe, you should rely on your own common sense and everyday experience. And then it gives, of course, the jury some guidelines as to what questions they should ask when determining a person's credibility. And then when you jump down to number 4, it indicates that sometimes the testimony of different witnesses will not agree, and you must decide which testimony you accept. You should think about whether the disagreement involves something important or not, and whether you think that someone is lying or simply mistaken. People see and hear things differently. And witnesses may testify honestly, but simply be wrong about what they thought they saw or remembered. It is a good idea to think about which testimony agrees best with the other evidence in the case. Presented to the court in terms of other evidence are 2 exhibits and a police officer. Police officer didn't quite remember independently anything, but he said he remembered seeing a laceration over the eye. He didn't see any bandaged up head. He didn't recall receiving any documents. And then his recollection of a laceration over the eye is supported by People's Exhibit 1, right? There's a laceration over the eye. So the court, believes that there was a laceration over the eye. And then the other independent evidence is the People's Exhibit 2. And if you recall, I asked quite a few questions about certain things. I asked questions about what time the officer took his report. I asked questions about what time Mr. Gardner went to the hospital. I asked questions about when Mr. Gardner went to the police department. Because the court was laser focused on People's Exhibit 2. Court was laser focused on People's Exhibit 2, which according to People's Exhibit 2 was printed on March the 12th at 2:14 a.m. So when you leave a hospital, when you go to emergency, you get ready to go home, they say, here go your discharge papers. This is what we want you to do when you get out this hospital. Okay, so the officer said to me, he took a report at 10:30 p.m. Mr. Gardner said they were at the house about 8:30. Mr. Gardner told me he went from that house to his house to the hospital. That's not true. Let me just say this. That's not true. Didn't happen. He would have had to leave the house, go home, go to the police department, make a report, then go to the hospital. Because the hospital at 2:14 in the morning gave him his discharge papers. Additionally, the hospital at 1:34 in the morning gave him a tetanus shot, a diphtheria shot, an ancillary pertussis injection at 1:30 in the morning. Additionally, I don't see nothing on this discharge paper that say follow up with a head specialist. I don't see nothing on here that said we gave you some Tylenol for your headache. Furthermore, the people made a big, made some to-do about the fact that Mr. Smith didn't go to his mother-in-law's funeral of his wife of 30 years who he was separated from and living in a different state. After he drove all the way from Texas to Tennessee to pick up his son so his son could go and mourn the death of his grandmother. And then he rode from Tennessee to Detroit, Michigan. And then he said, bump all this, and he went back to Texas. Well, ain't nobody said nothing about the fact that Mr. Gardner got out the hospital and didn't go to his own mother's funeral. That is absolutely ludicrously ridiculous. And I said, Mr. Gardner, why didn't you go to your mother's funeral? What? He said, because I had to go to the police and make a report. Well, that's not true. Because the officer said he took a report at 10:30 p.m. The hospital said they released him at 2:14 a.m. The funeral was at 10 or 11 the next day. The court finds Mr. Gardner's testimony to be completely false. To be completely false. Because otherwise, why would I make it up? Why would I say I went to the hospital first and then went to the police department? Why would I say that? Why would I say I had a whole bandage on my head? I'm looking at this picture. Who took the picture? It was stipulated to. When was the picture taken? Before or after the bandage was on his head? And then why was a bandage on the head? I've been to a lot of hospitals. My children have all had concussions. My son played soccer. This is my everyday common sense. My son played soccer. He had 4 concussions and not nary a damn concussion. I don't know how to spell it now, for neither time when he went to the hospital for his concussion, did they bandage up his head. Not a time. Never, my son came home with some bandages around his head. That didn't even make sense. It makes sense that Mr. Smith and Mr. Gardner don't get along because for some reason, after 30 years of marriage, Mr. Smith and his wife separated, and perhaps the family isn't happy with that, and I don't know whose fault it was. And so he came down and said, what you doing in my daddy's house? And then I don't know if the father told Mr. Smith, you ain't gotta leave, it's my house, or if he said, yeah, I don't know, get out, but Mr. Smith didn't leave. Well, what I do know is that Mr. Gardner got put out, or Mr. Gardner left. And what I do know is that if Mr. Gardner was going to the car to pick something out the trunk, because his father told him to get something out the trunk, there's no way I could believe that they would then lock him out. Who gonna lock you out? Open the door. So if it's my house, I'm gonna tell my daughter, you better open that door. How dare you lock my son out of my house? It's my house. It's my house. Open the door for my son, who I sent outside to get some pop and something else out the trunk. Well, the daddy didn't want the pop no more because they locked him out. And apparently, I'm left with the impression that they never let him back in. And then can't imagine why he didn't go to his own mother's funeral after that. Probably because he was the one that got put out. He was the one that got told off. His sisters are not here. His father is not here. The man that was outside with him is not here. So I'm left with my own common sense and everyday experience. Mr. Smith, please stand. Court finds Mr. Smith to be adjudicated not guilty of the charge of assault aggravated. Let me say for the record, because I do, I don't believe that Mr. Smith was the aggressor. I believe he hit him, and he testified in a minute. He hit him like 4 or 5 times. But I also believe that Mr. Gardner was coming on him aggressive. They in the street, and he pushed them, and then they started fighting. And that's how he got walked down. But he didn't have no bandage on his head. That's not the truth. It don't even make sense. Court finds not guilty. You can bring the order downstairs, call them, tell them I'm on my way. Everybody have a great day. Stay safe.
Thank you.